Obeying without thinking is like walking down a windowless corridor, believing the exit is just ahead, when in fact you're only heading deeper into the labyrinth. Kafka knew that blind obedience doesn't liberate us, but turns us into shadows. Imagine waking up every day and doing exactly what's expected of you, without ever asking why. It's like being a puppet, someone pulling the strings and you moving, without choosing where you go. Franz Kafka, a writer who lived long ago, understood this feeling better than anyone. He wrote stories about people who followed rules without understanding why, and ended up trapped in strange and frightening situations. In Kafka's stories, ordinary people wake up transformed into insects, are tried for crimes they don't know what they are, or are trapped trying to enter mysterious castles. Sounds strange, doesn't it? But if we look closely, we'll see that these stories speak to something that happens to all of us. We follow orders without question. When you obey without thinking, something important inside you begins to slumber. It's as if a light is dimming, growing dimmer every day. This light is your ability to choose to truly be yourself. Kafka saw this danger and wanted to warn us through his strange and profound stories. Think about the times you've done something just because everyone does it, or because it's always been that way. How many times have you followed a path without asking if it was really what you wanted? It's as if there's an invisible rule book that everyone follows, but no one actually reads. The greatest danger lies not in the orders we receive, but in the ease with which we accept them. When we stop questioning, we begin to lose pieces of ourselves. Our curiosity fades, our creativity is hidden, and our courage to be different fades. Kafka shows us that we need to wake up from this dream of obedience. We need to open our eyes and ask, why am I doing this? Is this what I really want? What would happen if I chose a different path? Most of us live by orders we don't even realize. They're like rules written in the air, invisible but powerful. From a young age, we learn to do what's expected of us. Buy things to be accepted, work jobs we don't like, smile when we're sad. Have you ever stopped to think about why you need the latest cell phone? Why should you study something you don't like? Why do you have to dress a certain way? These aren't just choices. They're silent commands we follow without realizing it. The weight of this obedience is like carrying a backpack that grows heavier and heavier. At first, we barely feel it, but over time we begin to walk hunched over, staring at the ground, forgetting to look up at the sky and dream. Kafka wrote about characters who lived this way. In The Metamorphosis, Gregor Samsa works a job he hates just to support his family, until one day he wakes up transformed into a giant insect. It seems strange, but it's a way of showing what happens when we live without question. We lose our humanity, becoming something else. The invisible pain of blind obedience is everywhere. It's the father who never wanted to be a lawyer but followed the family profession. It's the child who abandons their artistic talent because they said it won't pay. It's you, when you hold back from expressing an opinion for fear of what others will think. When we live like this, life becomes mechanical. Wake up, work, eat, sleep, repeat. Like a machine that works perfectly, but without joy, without surprise, without true meaning. It's like being stuck on a treadmill that never stops and never gets anywhere. The saddest thing is that we often don't even realize this prison. We think it's normal to feel tired, empty, and a nameless sadness. We accept that life is just like that and continue obeying, hoping that one day magically we'll feel complete. Kafka saw this invisible pain and placed it in his stories so we could see it too. He invites us to feel the weight of the chains we carry, because only then can we begin to free ourselves. If this has already spoken to you, subscribe now and leave a like so you don't miss the next videos. From a certain point, there is no turning back. That is the point that must be reached. This quote from Kafka seems strange at first glance. Why would anyone want to reach a point of no return? But what he's saying is profound. There comes a moment when we realize we can no longer go back to living as before. We can no longer accept unquestioningly following orders. When Kafka wrote about mysterious courts, inaccessible castles, and inexplicable transformations, he was actually talking about our daily lives. He saw how people become small in the face of large, impersonal systems. The real danger Kafka warns us about isn't just about obeying others, but about how easily we accept becoming less than we are. Like a river slowly changing course until it's flowing in the opposite direction, our lives can change so much that one day we wake up and don't recognize the person in the mirror. In the story The Trial, the character Joseph K. is arrested for a crime that is never explained. He spends his entire life trying to defend himself in a confusing and impossible to understand judicial system. It's a story about how we can spend our entire lives trying to please a system that will never tell us exactly what it wants from us. Kafka wasn't just criticizing governments or corporations. He was pointing to something within us, our desire to obey, to follow the herd, to not question. It's easier to go with the flow than to swim against it. It's more comfortable to believe that things are this way than to ask, why can't they be different? When we stop asking these questions, something inside us begins to die. Our curiosity, our creativity, our ability to dream and create something new. Little by little, we become like Kafka's characters, confused people in a world that makes no sense, following rules they don't understand. The point of no return Kafka mentions is the moment we realize this. It's painful, but necessary. It's like waking from a dream and seeing reality for the first time. After that, we can no longer pretend we didn't see it. We can no longer blindly obey. It's frightening, but also liberating. Kafka invites us to reach this point, to have the courage to open our eyes and see the invisible chains that bind us, because only after seeing can we begin to free ourselves. If Kafka were alive today, he would be amazed at how many new forms of blind obedience we've created. Our modern world, with all its brilliant technology, has created even more complex labyrinths in which we can get lost. Think about the algorithms that decide what you see on social media. They choose what you should watch, read, and even think about, based on what will keep you staring at the screen for as long as possible. It's like an invisible court that judges your tastes without you knowing the rules of the court. Or think about the work emails that arrive late at night, expecting immediate responses, the notifications that interrupt your family dinner, the apps that count your steps, monitor your sleep, and assess your productivity. They're like little digital bosses who never stop giving orders. Kafka wrote about characters who felt small in the face of large, complicated systems. Today, these systems are in our pockets, on our wrists, in our homes. They are fast, efficient, and very difficult to question. The problem isn't the technology itself. The problem is how we obey it without thinking. We accept terms and conditions without reading them. We allow apps to access our photos, location, and conversations. We change our habits to gain likes. All of this without stopping to ask, is this helping me be more myself, or is it transforming me into something else? In The Castle, Kafka tells the story of K. Ox, a man who tirelessly tries to enter a mysterious castle, following confusing rules and receiving contradictory instructions. Today, many of us are like K, trying to understand the unwritten rules of social media, the secret codes to success, the invisible expectations of the digital society. The bureaucratization of life hasn't diminished. It's just changed form. Before, it was paper, stamps, and lines. Now, it's passwords, captchas, and software updates. The result is the same. We feel small, confused, and often powerless. Kafka's genius was to show that even when rules seem absurd, we continue to follow them. We continue to believe that if we obey correctly, we will be rewarded, even when that reward never arrives. Today, more than ever, we need Kafka's critical eye. We need to stop and ask, why am I endlessly scrolling this screen? Why do I feel the need to reply to this message at 11 p.m.? Why do I care so much about the opinions of people I've never met? Comment here. Which part of your life seems most like absurd theater? Here's the most difficult secret Kafka reveals to us. The system that controls us isn't as powerful as we think. The strongest prison isn't made of walls, but of fear. It seems easier to blame others for our blind obedience. We blame bosses, governments, big companies, algorithms. They make us obey, we say. We have no choice. But Kafka looks deeper and asks, what if the greatest jailer is within us? What if deep down we obey because we are afraid to be free? In The Burrow, Kafka tells the story of a creature who spends his life building a perfect hiding place, protecting himself from enemies that may not even exist. The creature lives in constant fear, never truly enjoying the freedom he could have. Isn't this the life of many of us? We're afraid of failing, so we never try. We're afraid of being rejected, so we never show who we really are. We're afraid of being alone, so we accept relationships that diminish us. We're afraid of looking weird, so we follow the crowd. The real danger isn't just external control, but our internal willingness to accept that control. It's as if a part of us wants to be controlled, wants to give up the difficult task of choosing our own path. You believe they are the ones who command you, but maybe it is you who have already given up choosing. This is the dark turning point, realizing that we are often complicit in our own imprisonment, that we signed the contract of our surrender without anyone forcing us to. Kafka doesn't say this to make us feel guilty, but to wake us up, to show that if part of the prison is within us, the key to freedom is also there. When Joseph K. in the trial is finally executed, he says, like a dog. It's the moment he realizes he spent his entire life obeying a system he never understood, never deeply questioned. It's a revelation that comes too late. Kafka doesn't want us to get to that point. He wants us to see now, while there's still time to change. He wants us to recognize not only the external currents, but also the internal ones. He wants us to have the courage to look at our fears and ask, are these fears protecting me or imprisoning me? Resisting doesn't mean destroying everything around you. It's not about breaking windows or shouting at the sky. True resistance, the kind Kafka teaches us, begins much more quietly and profoundly. Resistance is learning to say no when something inside you tells you to say no. It's recognizing that little voice inside that whispers, this isn't right for me, even when all the voices around you are screaming otherwise. In a world that values constant action, sometimes the greatest courage lies in stopping, in observing, in questioning. In The Hunger Artist, Kafka tells the story of a man who performs fasting in a cage. People admire him for a while, but soon tire of him and forget him. When asked why he fasts, he simply replies, because I have never found the food I would like to eat. It's a story about someone who refuses to swallow what doesn't truly nourish them, even if it means being alone and misunderstood. It's a story about the courage to reject what everyone accepts when it doesn't nourish your soul. Resistance doesn't mean having all the answers. It doesn't mean knowing exactly how the world should be. It just means having the honesty to admit when something doesn't make sense to you, even if it makes sense to everyone else. Kafka doesn't offer us a map out of the labyrinth. He simply shows us that we're in a labyrinth, which is a start. He invites us to stop running blindly through the corridors and start observing the walls, questioning the structure, and finding our own way. Resistance starts with small things. It's asking why when given a command. It's creating a moment of silence before responding automatically. It's observing our own thoughts and asking, is this thought really mine, or was it planted within me? Courage is not in destroying the system, but in preserving something precious within us that the system tries to erase. Our ability to think for ourselves, to feel deeply, to choose consciously. The real confrontation isn't against others, but against our own tendencies to follow the herd, to fall asleep, to surrender our will. It's a silent, daily confrontation that takes place in the intimate realm of our choices. Write in the comments, do you face the void or run away from it? In Kafka's stories, characters often find themselves in absurd, hopeless situations. One man wakes up as an insect, another is accused of an unknown crime, another tries in vain to enter a castle. There seems to be no hope, no solution, but there's a hidden lesson in these seemingly desperate stories. Kafka isn't just showing us prisons, he's inviting us to see the prisons we're already in, so we can begin to think about freedom. Mindless obedience is a form of slow death. It's like falling asleep to your own life, letting others write your story. It's comfortable, yes. We don't have to make difficult decisions, we don't have to face the unknown, but the price of this comfort is too high. We lose the chance to truly live. The absurd in Kafka's stories is not just a prison, it's also a mirror. When Gregor Samsa sees himself as an insect, it's shocking and terrifying, but it's also revealing. He can finally see how he was treated, how he lived, how he had lost his humanity long before his physical transformation. The emptiness we feel when we stop blindly obeying can be frightening. Suddenly there are no clear rules to follow, no clear paths. We're alone with our freedom, and it can feel like a bottomless abyss. But it is precisely in this emptiness that we find the chance to awaken. As Kafka says, a book must be the axe that breaks the icy sea within us. His strange, disturbing stories are that axe, breaking the frozen surface of our obedient lives so that we can see the deep waters below. Kafka's hidden teaching is that even in the most absurd and desperate situations, there is the possibility of consciousness. Even when we cannot change circumstances, we can change how we see them, how we respond to them. Joseph K. in The Trial never understands what he's accused of, never manages to adequately defend himself. But what if, instead of desperately trying to prove his innocence to an absurd court, he had questioned the court's very legitimacy? What if he had realized that his true prison was his need for approval? Emptiness is not an enemy, it is a mirror. When all distractions are removed, when all orders and expectations fall away, we can finally see ourselves clearly. We can see what we truly want, what we truly value, who we truly are. This is the paradoxical gift Kafka offers us. Through stories of imprisonment, he shows us paths to freedom. Through narratives of despair, he ignites a small flame of hope. Not the hope that everything will be okay, but the hope that we can remain awake, conscious, alive, even in the most absurd situations. And you, how many times have you followed a path just because they said it was the right one, even though you felt inside that it wasn't yours? How many times have you obeyed without asking if that order was really yours? Maybe it was choosing a profession. Medicine pays, they said, and you put your dream of being an artist in a locked drawer. These clothes aren't suitable, they warned, and you started dressing to please eyes you didn't even know. This isn't for boys. This isn't for girls. And so we all learn to cut pieces of ourselves to fit into boxes made by others. Think back to a moment in your childhood. Remember what it was like to see the world with curious eyes, to ask questions adults found uncomfortable, to imagine possibilities everyone said were impossible. That child is still inside you, waiting to be heard. Kafka, in his strange stories, is actually talking about this child, about how the world tries to transform him into something he's not, how it tries to make him obey rules that don't make sense to him. When Gregor Samsa turns into an insect, his family is horrified. But the real tragedy isn't the transformation. It's the fact that they never really knew him as a human. They were so consumed with what he could do for them, with the money he brought home, that they never saw his true colors. How many times have you felt this way? As if the people around you only valued what you could do, not who you were. As if your usefulness was more important than your essence? Kafka's invitation is to return to yourself, to rediscover that inner voice that has been silenced by so many shoulds, musts, and have-tos, to remember what you wanted to be before the world told you what you should want. It's not an easy path. When we start questioning the orders we automatically follow, many people won't understand. Some may even get angry. It's more comfortable for everyone when we follow the script, when we don't rock the boat. But as Kafka said, in the fight between you and the world, bet on yourself. Not because you'll win, the world is big and powerful, but because, even if you lose, you will have lived according to your truth. You will have truly been you, not just an obedient shadow of what others wanted you to be. This is the deepest connection between you and Kafka's strange stories. You're both trying to make sense in a world that often seems meaningless. You're both trying to be real in a world that prefers copies. Those who obey without thinking get lost in the labyrinth. Those who question, even when lost, have already found the way out. This sentence contains the essence of what Kafka tried to show us through his disturbing and strange stories. It's not just a matter of obeying or disobeying, it's a matter of being awake or asleep as we walk through life. The labyrinth isn't just the outside world with its confusing rules, endless bureaucracies, and impersonal systems. The real labyrinth is within us, our doubts, our fears, our contradictions. That's why simply following the rules doesn't lead us to the exit, because the rules were made for the labyrinth, not beyond it. When we obey without thinking, we become part of the labyrinth. Its walls become our walls, its boundaries become our boundaries. We begin to believe there's nothing beyond the corridors we know. Like the character in The Trial, we spend our entire lives trying to navigate an incomprehensible system, never questioning whether the system itself makes sense. But when we begin to question, not just the external rules, but also the inner voices that tell us to obey, something magical happens. Even though we're still physically in the labyrinth, spiritually, we've already found the way out. Because the real prison isn't the walls, but the belief that the walls are all that exists. Kafka doesn't promise us a happy ending. His stories rarely end with characters finding peace or freedom. But he offers us something perhaps more valuable, the dignity of being conscious, the dignity of not being merely an object being pushed by invisible forces, but a being who thinks, feels, and questions. In A Country Doctor, Kafka writes about a doctor who, on a stormy night, is called to see a distant patient. He doesn't want to go but feels he must. In the end, he finds himself trapped in an absurd situation, unable to help the patient, unable to return home. It's a story about how our obligations can become traps, but it's also a story about how, even trapped, the doctor maintains his humanity through his conscience, through his questioning. True awakening isn't about finding definitive answers. It's about learning to live with the questions. It's not about escaping the labyrinth completely. It's about creating spaces of freedom within it. It's not about never feeling fear again. It's about not letting fear decide for you. Those who obey without thinking lose themselves not only in the external labyrinth, but also in themselves. They forget who they are, what they love, why they're here. Those who question, even when they don't find all the answers, keep the flame of consciousness burning. And this flame, however small, is more powerful than all the walls of the labyrinth. The real danger, as Kafka showed us through his strange and profound stories, isn't just in obeying. After all, some rules are necessary for us to live together, to build a society that works for everyone. The real danger lies in forgetting ourselves in this process of obedience, in losing touch with that inner voice that knows what is true for us, even when all the external voices tell us otherwise. Kafka, with his giant insects, his mysterious courts and his inaccessible castles, created mirrors in which we can see our own lives reflected, not to make us despair, but to awaken us. To remind us that, even in the midst of absurdity, we have the capacity to remain conscious, to make choices, to preserve something sacred within ourselves. To think is to resist. To question is not just to doubt, but to create space for something new to emerge. When we stop automatically accepting what we're told, we begin to listen to what our hearts have to say. And this voice, often silenced by the noise of the world, contains seeds of freedom, creativity, and authentic life. Resistance doesn't mean living in constant revolt. It doesn't mean rejecting everything and everyone. It simply means creating a small space between stimulus and response, a moment to ask, does this make sense to me? Is this aligned with who I truly am? Kafka reminds us that living is more than surviving, more than functioning, more than obeying. Living is being present, awake, aware. It's making difficult choices sometimes, facing emptiness and uncertainty, and having the courage to be different when necessary. In a world that values conformity, that rewards those who follow the herd without asking questions, this reminder is revolutionary. It's a call not to change the entire world, but to begin by changing our relationship with it, to move from passive objects to active subjects of our own stories. As Kafka wrote, "You are free, and that is why you are lost." Freedom is scary because it forces us to take responsibility. It's easier to blame the system, the boss, the parents, the society for our choices. But true freedom begins when we recognize that, even with all the external limitations, we still have the power to choose how to respond, how to think, how to be. This is Kafka's legacy to us, not a detailed map out of the labyrinth, but a torch to light our way as we seek our own way out. If this message touched you, comment here, "I don't obey without thinking." Watch the video on the card now and continue this journey.